So let's talk about iris fiber density and structural integrity. So when we're talking about density in terms of iridology, it's related to the closeness and the depth of the weave of the iris fibers, right? So if you look at this chart here, you'll see on the bottom right-hand corner, that's a very resilient eye. You'll see that the fibers are very close together and they're very dense, right? There's a lot of depth to them. There's not a lot of color behind them. That makes sense, right? So that's a very resilient eye structure. And then if you look catty corner across from that, you'll see a resilient eye. The fibers are kind of close together. There's some slight separation or rarefication, as it's termed in iridology. And you can see some color, some darkness behind it, because behind the eye, it's dark, right? It's black behind the eye, and that's coming through, right? So that's the eye that's resilient. You can tell why it's not very, very resilient, but it's kind of resilient. And then if you go to the bottom left-hand section, you will see a moderately resilient eye. If you look at the outer edge, you'll see that it is pretty dense, right? The fibers are close together. Looks similar to the very resilient eye. But if you go closer to the pupil, you'll see that there is some lacuna, is what we call them, some separations, some pretty large separations or holes in the fibers. And so when you start to see the lacuna or those holes, it speaks to a loss of resiliency. So that eye is only moderately resilient because there are some fairly large separations. But then if you look at the top right-hand corner, that eye is not very resilient at all. You can see that there are large holes all the way through, and the fibers are not closely woven at all. So that person is mildly resilient. And so when you get a client in your office, this gives you a lot of insight into their ability to fight off disease, right? It means that if they are very resilient, they're considered to be genetically stronger, meaning they have the ability to ward off both internal and external imbalances, and that they can metabolize uh, more efficiently, and they're able to release toxins, and they're able to utilize nutrients, right? That's what a very resilient person is able to do. These people are able to work for long hours. They can handle jobs that require standing for long periods of time. Their bodies can cope with injury and strong emotions, stressful emotions, and stress on the body much better than somebody who's mildly resilient. Now, this does not mean that a person who's very resilient won't get sick. And it does not mean that a person who is mildly resilient will. What it does mean, though, is that a person who's mildly resilient will have to take more care of themselves. It's kind of like, I heard an example once about a table, like a living room table, right? That is on four legs. They're in there tight. They're sturdy. It's an oak wood table. You can put maybe a TV on it if you wanted to, your dinner, some drinks, books, and it's going to hold up just fine. You can take maybe another table that's maybe plywood, a little bit thinner. You can't put as much on it. You probably can't put a TV on it for long. Maybe you can put some books or some dinner or whatever, but it's just not as strong. And so what somebody who is mildly resilient would have to do is be much more careful about the choices they make, be much more intentional about getting their vitamins, their minerals, the nutrients, because their body's not holding on to that, right? It's not using it. Even if they eat a very healthy meal or diet, have a healthy lifestyle, if your body can't hold on to it, then you have to do it more often because your body's losing it, right? Now, the very resilient person might be able to eat a bunch of junk food and work, stay up all night long, and they never seem to get sick, right? They just seem to burn both ends of the candle. Never seem to get sick until they do. Because you can wear that down as well. Just because you have a stronger ability to ward off disease doesn't mean you can abuse your body forever and never ever have to suffer the consequences. So we are going to, in the next section, let's look at a couple of I's, and you guys can tell me if you think they are very resilient, moderately resilient, or mildly resilient. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's have some fun and practice. So I put a picture on the left that I want you to take a look at. I put the chart on the right so you can have the chart to practice because we're just going to have some fun with it. So would you say the eye on the left, the lymphatic eye on the left, is that a resilient eye, a very resilient eye, moderately resilient, or mildly resilient? I'll give you a few minutes to look at it, a few seconds to look at it. Okay, you ready? If you said resilient, you're right. I would say it's resilient. Now, there are some rarifications, some separations, but they're scattered. I would still go with resilient. Now, what you need to understand is that iridology is an art and science. And so what you'll do as an iridologist is probably get a second opinion from a different iridologist to see what they think, right? But I would say this is resilient, and I'm pretty sure most of you guessed resilient as well. And this is a lymphatic eye. It looks like maybe there's something going on with the pancreas, something going on with the brain. And you'll figure out how I know this pretty soon in the next module or later on in the course. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, dun, 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 dun. Is this a resilient eye, very resilient, moderately resilient, or mildly resilient? If you said very resilient, you are correct. And it is a lymphatic eye. It's over acid, meaning there's a lot of acid in the body. Looks like maybe there's some digestive issues going on, probably have constipation. So anyway, you'll learn how I did that later on in the course as well. I bet you're fascinated. Okay, let's go to another one. What is the name of this type of eye? Do you remember? Biliary. Good job. Biliary, which is a mixed eye, right? It's a brown or mixed eye. So, is it resilient, mildly resilient, moderately resilient, or very resilient? I think we can say very resilient is out of the question. So let's not even say very resilient. But is it resilient? Would you say? No? Okay, I'm with you. It's not resilient. So let's look at moderately resilient or mildly resilient. Which way are you leaning? Moderately resilient or mildly resilient? Okay, this is the tricky one. So let's talk about it. You probably said moderately resilient. And I can see why you would say that, but I would say mildly resilient because if you look at the fibers around the outside edge of the eye, you'll notice that you don't see the fibers, right? You see a lot of coloring, the markings there. There's a lot of issues going on. You see the orange pigments, but you don't actually see the fibers in the eye. So I would say this eye is mildly resilient. I thought I'd throw that curveball in. Let's do another one. Oh, look at this one. That's a beautiful eye. Okay, let's look at this biliary eye. And yes, it's biliary. Some of you may have said brown or hematogenic, but it's biliary because you can see some of the colors coming through. Do you see like the yellows and oranges? So it's biliary. Okay, now, how resilient is this eye? Did you say resilient? Moderately resilient? I would go with resilient. And if there was like somewhere where the two could meet in the middle, that might be a better answer. But if I had to put it down on my chart, I would say resilient. Now, there are some issues going on in the collarette. That's the areas immediately around the pupil. And that's where most of the separation is. And so that's really a stomach issue, digestive issue. But I will go with resilient. It's resilient. All right, let's do another one. Oh, and what is the name of this brown eye? Hematogenic. Good. It's hematogenic. So this hematogenic eye, is it resilient or very resilient? It is very resilient. You're right. Very resilient. They have some lipemic diathesis, which means they have some high cholesterol buildup. Maybe something going on with the liver. And it looks like their anxiety tetanic, high stress level. So anyway, we'll learn about that later on. Let's do one more. This is another hematogenic eye. And what type of resiliency does this person have? Resilient, mildly resilient, very resilient, or moderately resilient? Moderately resilient would be the way I go as well. I hope you said that. Good. So that was fun. It is both an art and a science. Iridology is both an art and a science. So it's going to take some practice and some of your knowledge of the client to really come up with some good, solid answers. So that was fun, but let's move on to some iris zones. Actually, I think we should do let's do the chart first, and then we'll do the iris zones. So I'll see you in the next section.